Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Vaughn. I cannot see myself, so I can't see you either, and I can't see myself, so I'm talking to my computer. But let us get the college kickoff going. Here on the title slide, you see my email address, and also please note that my primary way of communicating, if you haven't figured this out already, is that Tuesday email that gets sent through Aspen. I send it to the student email there, secondary email into both the parent contacts or whoever's in as the contacts. And so if you're not getting that, either you're not in Aspen or it's going to your spam filter. So please check your spam filter. There's a lot of information in those emails, and there will continue to be for the next 12 months. So this is our agenda. We're going to talk about just overall roles and expectations. We'll talk a little bit about the timeline, about the ACT and the whole test optional thing, how to make a college list, and I'm going to talk about money. If you're talking to any of the senior parents right now, you know that financial aid offers are out and are of concern, because they almost always are. I've been doing this for a long time, and this is when kids come in and ask for scholarship info. So hopefully I can attack some of that. And then we have a big announcement at the end that we're super excited about, that I hope your kids are going to be able to take great advantage of. So let's get going. My title is College and Career Counselor. I really do span both spectrums, so college and career. Tonight's focus really is college, but I do also help with all these other things. So I'm working with apprenticeships, and I'm working with creating strategic college lists and crafting applications and all of those other things, choosing majors. I work with kids on TCATs and all those things. So just be aware that that my office and I do more than just college. I believe very strongly in a division of labor in this process. I very, very strongly believe that the student should be in charge. Parents, guardians, and even me, like, we're all here to support that student in their process. But it's really like, we've already been to college. We've already done our applications. It's their time to do this and take some responsibility. Certainly, we're not going to let them fall through the cracks. We're there to support, but it should be them, for example, coming to meet with me and emailing me and contacting college counselors and those things. And we'll coach them through that, but it's really their job. It's their job to know what their deadlines are and to meet those deadlines. And SCORE is very helpful with that. I've talked more in depth with the students about SCORE, but I'm willing to talk about that tonight as well. It's your job to take them on their college visits. It's really your job to file their financial aid forms. And that's to me the biggest piece of this. That kind of goes. I'm always surprised that the parents who leave the financial aid forms to the student, because it's just so much more complicated than they understand. So students are responsible for filling out their own applications, for sharing their financial aid deadlines, like I said, calling admissions offices and checking in with me. And I'm going to start actually meeting with juniors in small groups starting, I think, this week, based on the survey that they filled out in an advisory last week. It's also been in my newsletter, and I think Ms. Vaughn sent it out a couple times in the email. So just make sure that they get that filled out, and as soon as that's done, I can start to bring them in. They can be part of those small groups. Remember, through this process, is that our primary goal is that our students grow up to be happy, healthy, and independent adults. And they really can gain a lot from taking charge of this process. Number one, they get the practical skills of having to navigate just the world as you and I know it, having to wait on the phone for the phone trees and making calls and scheduling interviews. They kind of develop a sense of autonomy and how to work within a bureaucracy. They develop self-confidence, real-world problem solving, and they learn how to deal with ambiguity, because they're not going to get their answers right away all the time. And certainly that waiting period between the time that the application goes out and the responses come back, that's a lot of ambiguity, and that's a stressful couple months for kids. But they live through it, and it's okay, and they are so happy and confident at the end of it. In the last couple of years, these two books have come out, and I find them to be two of the best resources I have ever found on the whole college application process. I know I've been pushing the truth about college admissions, but just about 6 weeks ago, Ethan Sawyer came out with his College Admissions Essential. Ethan Sawyer, if you're reading my newsletter, you know I love him. He is the college admissions guy, or the college essay guy. I really recommend both of these books. Maybe the College Admission Essentials one has more actual exercises for kids to do to help them through their essays and those kinds of things, more sort of step by step. But I think both of them are great resources. So I strongly encourage each family to have them. Hint, hint, I do not get a commission, by the way. So let's talk timeline. This spring, the first thing you need to do is set your college priorities. By that, I mean, what do you want your ideal college to be? Do you want it to be near the beach, near the mountains, within 4 hours at home? Do you want it to be the lowest possible tuition possible? Do you want it to be the highest prestige college possible? Do you want them to be able to do research or to be able to ride their horse? So all of those things that are priorities, they really need to be written down, because we're going to go back and back and back to these as you develop your college list. And when I reveal to you that the college list should not be an infinite list of schools, this is how you're going to get it narrowed down. So you're going to research schools, you're going to talk with me about your goals. The college visits to FHS this year are virtual, and I've had a really hard time getting kids to sign up for them this semester, I'll be honest. But it's the same people who are going to read your applications are the people who are manning those college visits. And the same goes for the fall. We'll have a lot more visitors in the fall, so please keep an eye out for those. They're in the newsletter. Summer college visits need to be kind of underway, and there's no substitute for the visit. I'll go into that in a little bit. And also start thinking about what teachers you want to write your recommendations, because these are the teachers who know you best, the ones you've had this year. So let's talk about priorities. Here's a really good tool, Coursava.com. It's free for high school students. We have an account there, and so you can link to FHS through Coursava. But it is basically an electronic deck of cards, and you sort them into must have, don't want, would like to have, and those kinds of things. And so at the end, you have this list of must-haves, and you can manipulate them as you go along, and you think you really want a big sports school, and you're like, oh, no, wait, if I have a big sports school, maybe the research opportunities might not be there. So you might want to, reconfigure that list a little bit, and that's fine. And here are just some questions to think about. What kinds of people do you want to meet? What kind of people do you want to study under? What's the best environment for you? Those kinds of things. So set your priorities. And here I've added a list of tools for research. I've also put these on a big list at the end of this presentation, so you'll have it there as well. These are just some of my favorites. This summer, I want you to continue research, make sure those college visits happen, work on your essays, and then pretty much by the end of August, your list ought to be done. Pretty close to done anyway. There's just no substitute for getting your feet on the campus to get an idea of whether or not that's going to be the right environment for you. There really is a lot to be said for seeing that school in person close up. I don't care how famous it is. I don't care how many of their graduates go on to graduate school. If you're not comfortable on that campus, if the campus political vibe isn't what you want it to be, if it's not as equitable as you want it to be, you're not going to know that unless you get there and go talk to people. And so I really, really encourage that. Absolutely. And you get 2 free days next year to do it. 2 excused absence days. All you have to do is bring back a piece of paper from admissions that says that you were there on that date. So that's next year as seniors. So the list. I greatly, vastly prefer that the list is no more than 10 to 12 schools. I think if you have more schools than that on your list, then you are not doing enough inner thought of what your priorities are, and you're spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on application fees, because application fees are anywhere from $50 to $150 per school. Your child is writing way too many essays because most of the schools require their own supplemental essays. I just feel like the students that I have who really think about and consider the qualities that they want in a school and restrict this list are happier with their choices than the students who apply to what I consider way too many schools and just pick the one that has the highest name or the highest scholarship. And while I realize that those are very important considerations for most families, we can take care of some of that financial worry before you even do the applications, and I'll get there in a minute. Your school should have 3 categories. So you should have beats, meets, and treats. So the beat schools are where your GPA and ACT are at the top end of the student admitted profile. I'm sorry, the admitted student profile, and the school admits more than 50% of its applicants. The meet category, your GPA and ACT are kind of right in the middle range of their admitted student profile, and the school admits 20 to 50% of its applicants. And the treat, these are what we used to call the reach schools. Some people call them the lottery schools because you might as well just win the lottery as well as get into these. But your GPA and ACT are in the middle range of the admitted student profile, and the school admits fewer than 20% of the applicants. That means that every school that admits fewer than 20% of its applicants for every single student is a treat school. So often what happens is I'll have my really high-end kids apply to UT because they know they can get in, and then apply to whatever the top 25 are, which all accept fewer than 20% of their applicants. Honestly, some of those kids end up at UT and they're not happy because they haven't checked out UT and they don't know what's available for them. They wanted to go away from home. Maybe they didn't get into as high school as they want, or the money's not there to go. I don't recommend that as a strategy. I really feel like stretching your schools out over these 3 categories is the way to go. And also make sure that all the schools on your list are something that you can pay for. And we'll go into that in a minute. So every school on the list should be one you're excited to attend and confident in your likelihood to thrive there and beyond. And then my additional commandment is thou shalt love thy safeties. So please, please, please don't apply to a school that you don't want to go to. There's no point in applying to a school you don't want to go to, because you're just going to be unhappy if that's where you end up. So please don't do that. So next fall, you're going to finalize your list. You're going to retake the ACT if you must, but please do not let it become an extracurricular. You're going to apply for admission in the fall, more than likely. There are your earliest deadlines right there. I will say that if you want to apply for competitive scholarships at the University of Tennessee, you must apply by November 1st. There are sometimes a school-based application that is separate from the admission application, and that is the case for UT. A lot of schools have a set of guaranteed scholarships as well as a set of what they might call competitive scholarships. And those competitive scholarships might have a separate deadline. So that's something to look out for. Applying for external scholarships, all the ones I know about are going to be in that newsletter. Your financial aid forms will open on October 1st. Do not fill them out before October 1st, or you will be filling them out for the wrong academic year. So just hold off on those forms until October 1st. Tennessee Promise application, which we will not let you forget, will be November 1st. We've, for a couple of years, had the highest filing rate for the county. We will pull all the kids in and make them fill that out, just because we don't know what's going to happen, and I think everybody needs to have a safety net. And then a lot of kids will want to apply the moment that their applications open on October 1st, but your transcripts will not be ready until probably September 1st, because we have to get through drop ad, and then we have to do a couple behind the scenes steps in Aspen to make all the transcripts have the correct GPA and deciles. So please don't plan to send transcripts until after September 1st. Next spring, you'll start getting your application results. Some schools will continue taking ACT scores if they require them for guaranteed scholarships. So you can continue to take the ACT. I hope you'll be done with it by then. Apply for external scholarships. Most of the local scholarships are available in the months of February, March, and April. In fact, we've just closed the window on a huge chunk of scholarships at the beginning of April. So be really aware. Again, they're going to be in that newsletter. February, March is when we want to look for scholarships in that newsletter. Excuse me one second. Complete all your remaining applications. If you're applying to ETSU or Pellissippi or Tennessee Tech, something like that, TCAT, you may not apply. You may choose to not apply until later in the spring. Certainly for the community colleges and the TCATs, there's no like priority scholarship deadline, and so those can wait until later. You must, if you're doing the Tennessee Promise, file the FAFSA by February 1st. You'll start getting your financial aid offers in late February and March, and your acceptances for the more selective schools in March and April. And then the Universal College Decision Day is May 1st, and that's the last day to deposit with a guaranteed hold on your seat. If you wait until after that, they will not guarantee your seat is held at a lot of the more competitive schools. I will say ETSU, MTSU, Tech, probably even UTC, don't follow May 1. So what you're just going to have to do is read the email as they come. They are going to tell you exactly what they want you to do. So just make sure you're reading your email. So I wanted to talk for a minute about the different kinds of admission plans. So I know all of you have kind of heard all these different terms. The most common admission plan that's on the screen in front of you is the second one, is just rolling admission or rolling decision. And this basically just means they read the applications as they come in and accept students as they go along. Most schools in the country do this. So everything you hear about with an early decision, regular decision, those schools don't, but honestly, most schools in the country do a rolling decision. One deadline you have to watch out for with a rolling decision is they might have a priority deadline, or they might call it their scholarship deadline, but that's usually the date by which you have to apply to be considered for competitive scholarships, and it will say so on their website. So just be aware of that rolling admission. Alabama, ETSU, MTSU, all of those schools have rolling admission with priority deadlines. I'm going to go to the right side of the page. Early decision is binding, and so I kind of liken this to a marriage proposal. You can apply to one ED school, one early decision school, and if it says yes, then you have to go. So the student signs the contract, the parent signs the contract, I sign the contract as a representative of the school. I will make you sign an additional thing for me that tells me that you have checked the school and done all of your financial due diligence and know that if you get into the school, you're going to be able to pay it. So this is a big deal. You don't want to break an early decision agreement. Certainly, I don't want Farragut to develop a relationship or a reputation as a school that breaks where the kids break early decision agreements. So this is not something to be taken lightly. So love the school and know that you can pay for it. Restrictive early action is fairly uncommon. It's non-binding, but you can only apply to an early action school or an REA school, and no ED school. Usually that's what they do. So every school who does REA does it a little bit differently, so you just have to read on their website. And I'm talking, there are probably fewer than 24 of these schools in the country. I know Stanford is one. Offhand, maybe Harvard is one. I mean, so these are pretty elite company, but just be aware that that's another version of this. Early action, the deadlines are usually about the same for early action, early decision, and REA. But early action, you can apply to as many early action schools as you want to. None of them are binding. You can compare all your early action and all your rolling decisions and all your regular decisions and compare all the financial aid statements and then wait until that May 1st date to make up your mind. Okay, so just early action, the one in the middle, leaves you lots of flexibility, but the good thing is you get to hear from some of the schools before Christmas, which is nice. We hope it's nice. And then regular decision is kind of just what it sounds like. It's regular decision. Usually that deadline is around January 1st. It could be as late as February 15th. But you apply and find out on that timeline that I explained earlier. So early action, early decision, and restrictive early action decisions usually come out right before Christmas. For bigger schools like Michigan, they might come out in mid-January. It just depends. But they're pretty good about telling you when decisions are gonna come out. So I leave this for your reference. I don't expect anybody to remember all that. To understand how to apply to any one college, please go to their website. The website is where you find everything you need, what deadlines there are, what required documents there are. So if you need one recommendation or two, who they're from, if they require an ACT, if they do require it, do you have to send them from ACT or will they take them from the high school transcript? They'll tell you about their honors college. They'll tell you about how to register for in-person visits. They'll tell you every single thing you need to know about that school. And they'll also give you contact information. It might be a general number or a general email, but there is contact information there. So if it's a school for which I don't have a contact to give you, it's also a place where you can go and reach out to and find the counselor for us. Okay, speaking of the ACT, the next in-school ACT is in September. I don't have the date offhand. It will be super easy to sign up. I think last year we just signed up on a piece of paper. Like the kids just came in literally and wrote their names on a piece of paper and we reserved a seat for them. But here are the out of school deadlines, dates and deadlines for the ACT. Like I said, I really don't want this to become a secondary, like an extracurricular activity. Like, hey, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna leave school and go to soccer and then go study for the ACT. It shouldn't take up as much of your life as that. If you're interested in studying outside the state of Tennessee, outside of the public schools in Tennessee, there are hundreds of test optional choices, including all of the top 50, pretty much every private school in the country. It's crazy how many test optional schools there are. There are even schools that are test blind. Like even if you send them a score, they will not look at it. Period. The whole University of California system, Berkeley, UCLA, UCSD, every single one of them will not look at your test scores if you send them. And this is honestly the direction we're headed in as a college admissions nation. But just be aware that you don't have to send an ACT just because you have it. So if your ACTs, despite your best efforts, have not been up to your standards or the college's standards, you don't have to send them. But please do read on their websites what they're going to do. So for example, at University of Tennessee, they're test optional for last year. They were test optional for admission and for most scholarships. For the volunteer scholarship, they're not, but they created a second scholarship to sort of balance that out for kids who didn't send their SATs or ACTs. And what they do is they judge holistically, just like they do for admissions. So they read the essays and they read the recommendations, and they I think they had them do a little extra essay on an extracurricular or something, but they weigh all of those things, just not the ACT, to make those decisions. There's a whole list, a live list that's pretty much up to the minute at fairtest.org if you want to see what schools are not requiring test scores. And when in doubt about setting a test score, just reach out to the admissions person in those admissions offices and say, hey, I have this GPA, I've had this many AP exams, this is my school, and I just, how will I be judged if I don't send the ACT? Or this is my ACT, should I send it? And they're going to be pretty direct with you. They can't tell you, obviously, that you're going to get in without it, but they can tell you, oh, no, that's not going to help you much. So always reach out to those admissions reps. And now the good stuff. Money. So you will likely not pay full sticker price at any school that you apply to, but you are going to pay something. And just as a side-by-side comparison, I wanted to show you the total cost at UT Knoxville, which is the most expensive of the public schools in the state, and the total cost at Vanderbilt. You can see they're just over $40,000 apart. But the average net cost at UT is only $4,000, $4,500 less than Vanderbilt. And you can see as the income levels go, the changes in the financial aid packages. And so these are net costs. So if your income is under $30,000 at UT, your average net cost is still going to be $10,000. But at Vanderbilt is $3,100. So don't just assume because the sticker price is outrageous, and it is outrageous. There's no denying it. Don't just assume that that's going to be out of the question for you. And let me show you how to do some of those things. So the first thing you can do is please have your child invite you to score as a parent. You cannot do what I'm about to tell you to do from the student side. So if you're just logging in to the student side with your kid, you can't do this. You have to be invited as a parent. But you'll have the option of adding some financial information that's not sold or kept or anything. But these average net prices are going to be closer to what your family can afford, or closer to what's going to be realistic. I shouldn't say it's closer to what you can afford, but it's closer to a realistic estimate of what you're going to be expected to pay. Okay, use that as your starting point. This is how financial aid essentially works. You fill out the FAFSA, and it creates a number called the expected family contribution. Every college creates its own cost of attendance based on 5 things: tuition, fees, room and board, books, 6 things, transportation, and incidental expenses, or pizza money, pizza, toothpaste, that kind of stuff. So that cost of attendance minus the EFC, and if it's the EFC from the FAFSA, from the federal form, is the same at every single school. Okay, the EFC from the FAFSA is the same at every school. So cost of attendance minus EFC equals demonstrated need. And that's what they're supposed to develop for you in terms of financial aid package. If you're applying to one of the 200 or so private schools, mostly private schools, that also require a second form called the CSS profile, this is all on their website. So we do the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and those 2 are expected family contribution. Create the expected family contribution. And the EFC at schools that use the profile can be different, because one school might include your home equity. One school might more heavily weigh how close you are to retirement. One school might more heavily weigh how many children you have in college, or if you have multiples, so triplets. I noticed we have a lot of twins and triplets in this class. And so again, so that expected family contribution using the profile is going to be different from school to school.
Hey, Ms. King.
We had a question that I wanted to go ahead and address because I think it's a pretty important one. We had a parent ask that if scores are not sent, will that affect the scholarship money that they could potentially receive?
Depends on the school. So it depends on the school. And that's one of those things that you need to, in that case, if they're not coming out and saying explicitly, a lot of schools will just say test optional is test optional. In fact, most of the private schools will say test optional is test optional. period, end of sentence. It will not affect your admission or your scholarship. But that's something that you need to nail down for each of the colleges you're applying to. That is an important question. Is that good?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I can't see anything. Okay, so we have the EFC. These are the 5 components that a school will use to try to develop a financial aid package for you. Remember, they're trying to meet full demonstrated interest or full demonstrated need. I'm sorry. There's no rule that a college has to meet full demonstrated need, and most do not. Okay, this is why it's so important to go ahead and do some of these things ahead of time. So they can give scholarships, which are merit aid. You've earned that somehow. They can give you student loans, which might be federal or private, or some of them maybe even school-based. Parent loans, work study is usually federally funded, and grants can be either federal or institutional. Just a clue, none of those schools like Duke or Vanderbilt or the Ivies or Stanford that are super selective, none of them give merit aid. All the aid you're getting out of those is going to be need-based, and they're very generous. If we go back to that Vanderbilt slide, you can see they're giving up, they're still giving half need-based aid all the way to an AGI of 110K and up, right? They're still giving just about $40,000 in need-based aid. But those are the schools, like, yes, if you can get in, and the reason is because everybody who gets into those schools is amazing, right? Everybody, they all deserve full academic, merit aid, but that's not the way those schools work because they're so hyper competitive. So just be aware of that as you go through. And so I know you're probably all pulling your hair out going, Ms. King, what do I do? Okay, here's what we do. You start with the SCORE financial function. Then the second thing I advise you to do is the thing called the FAFSA forecaster. And it is it's a federal, I don't want to say mock or imitator, but it's a mirror basically for the FAFSA that you can fill out beforehand to understand what your federal EFC will be. Okay, that's step 2. Step 3 is every college in the country is required to have what's called a net price calculator on their website. Google is your friend. Type in Center College net price calculator, and it will take you right there. Now, some of these are better than others. I know Vanderbilt has 2 on their website. One is really quick, and it's not as accurate as the longer one. So the second one is takes a long time, but they say it will get you within $3,000 of what your out-of-pocket costs are going to be. Okay, and then there's sort of a backup or a substitute for the net price calculator is this website called myintuition.org. There are, I think I counted yesterday, 70 different schools on here. Okay, I see that. 70 different schools on here, but you enter the information once and you can click on the different schools and it will give you your EFC. And then if you want to go ahead, take that number and call the financial aid office and go over that number with them, tell them what you did and all those things. So, so these are the things you're going to do for due diligence before your child applies or before you apply to college. I see a question asking what tax year you will be using. So they've gone to a system now that we use prior year. And I have to talk through this, I'm sorry, because it confuses me still a little bit. So it used to be that you had to file the FAFSA at the very beginning of the year. So let's say I'm filing the FAFSA this year, I would have to use 2020's taxes, right? So when you file the FAFSA for the 2022-23 school year, you're going to use 2020's taxes. It's the prior year. Right, so when you fill out your FAFSA for 2022-23, when your child will be a freshman, you'll use the 2020 taxes. We have a lot of promises in the state of Tennessee. Tennessee Promise covers tuition and mandatory fees at most associate degree granting and technical schools. This includes some schools have now added associate's degrees as part of their 4-year plan. So Tusculum College, Lincoln Memorial University, Austin Peay State University, South College, all have 2-year plans for which Tennessee Promise will work. There are no minimum academic requirements for this. You just have to hit deadlines, and we initially don't let you miss the first one, and once you've signed up for it, Tennessee Achieves, their umbrella organization, won't let you forget the remaining ones. And so second one is UT Promise, and it covers tuition and mandatory fees at any of the UT campuses, so UT Knoxville, UT Martin, and UT Chattanooga, for students whose family household income is under $50,000 a year. This UT Promise, you have to apply for the Tennessee Promise as well. Somehow the powers that be decided that those two fold together. So if you think you're a candidate for Tennessee Promise, just make sure, for UT Promise, just make sure you're doing the Tennessee Promise application. ETSU Promise Plus covers tuition and fees and some extras, and they have some additional supports, and there's something in there for housing, I think, for students eligible for the HOPE and the maximum Pell, which would be probably under that $50,000 or maybe even under $36,000 a year. So you can see those second two are need-based. The first one is not. There's no financial requirement. There's no academic requirement. We do, of course, have a series of scholarships in the state, and they are run by TSAC, or the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation. They are merit, need, and combination for qualifying. The most common is the HOPE. The HOPE requirement is a minimum of a 3.0 unweighted GPA at graduation, or a 21 composite on your ACT on one sitting of the ACT, so not a super score. And the FAFSA is the application for those. So as long as you're filing for financial aid and you're going to a school in the state of Tennessee and you qualify for those, you will get them. Okay, so where do we find money? The #1 place you get money is at the college. And that's through their guaranteed and competitive scholarships and any federal money they're funneling through the college. Local scholarships are also a great source of income. Those are going to be in my newsletters. There are several national scholarship engines. So these are some of those. Those are also on the website in particular. Also check with your employer and your parents' employers. A lot of those folks do give student scholarships. They may just be one time for the local and the parent employer scholarships, but you know, $2,000 is $2,000. So whatever you can get with those, I highly encourage you. Okay, finishing up. Please use the books I suggested. They are drama-free, logical, considered advice. One of the authors of The Truth About College Admission is Rick Clark, who is the Dean of Admissions at Georgia Tech. Ethan Sawyer, college essay guy. Again, everything he does is college admissions gold. Please, get on his email list, look at his website. He has a podcast. I'm getting college essay guy in constantly. He's just very good. Students, you're the drivers, so meet with me. If you haven't done your form on in Canvas for your advisory, please do that so you'll get on my list. Set your priorities, do your research. Parents, it's us. We're going to provide that organizational support. Please plan your college visits and do your financial due diligence. Tools for research, always start with your priorities and preferences. If you do nothing else, buy those 2 books and start with your priorities and preferences. Those are my 2 biggest pieces of advice. There are some of the suggestions I have for research tools. Again, here are the financial aid resources I mentioned, as well as links to the FAFSA and the profile at the bottom, but please remember they don't open till October 1st. Okay, and here's my big announcement, and I am like geekily excited about this. I'm more excited than I should possibly be, but we have arranged for our students to participate in college essay boot camps. So there will be 3 different chances for you to do this. So he's doing a 1 week, or it's really like a 3-day personal statement boot camp in May, 1 in June, and 1 in August. And there is an option to do it in the evening. And so please sign up for that. There's also in October a supplemental essay boot camp. So for that, you know, why us essay, or tell us about a time when, or tell us about your whatever, you know, the supplements. So there's a boot camp for that. And then there's also a personal insight question just for the University of California system. He's based in California, so that kind of makes sense. But we do have a lot of kids apply to the UCs. So if you can't make these, you will be able to access the recordings. But please, 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 please take advantage of these. I'm really excited to see what our students come up with after going through this experience with him. And he's going to walk you through that step by step by step by step. And it's going to be really cool, I think. So yay, big announcement. And as soon as I know how you can sign up for them, I will let you know. I just wanted to get this one out there. So that's my big announcement. So we can go from here to some questions if you'd like. And how can I stop sending them my picture? Oh, I have some questions. Okay, somebody not about GI Bill usage. Oh, that is a good question. I'm gonna publish this one. GI Bill is not a thing I know a lot about. If you tell me what school you're looking at, I know that they have people who are sort of experts in those areas. So, for example, UT Office of Veterans Affairs, they have their whole own office of this, and so they can help you out with that. Alternatively, if we have several students who are interested in this, I can ask them to come meet with us. So that's an option too.
You just got another one asking about the cost of the boot camps from the college essay guy.
It's free of cost. The school is paid for it. Will UTK require ACTs this year? They have not announced that. Yeah, we're waiting impatiently for the faculty senate to make a decision on that. So we just don't know yet.
I just sent another one over there, Ms. King. If a virtual student has not gotten to know their teachers very well online, could they ask a sophomore year teacher for a recommendation letter?
They can. Absolutely, they can. I would want to get in touch with that teacher and give them, I always make the kids fill out sort of a brag sheet for the teachers, and I would make sure that your student spends a good amount of time on that. A lot of kids try to just, you know, 1 or 2 sentences, but for this situation, you know, I would expect the student to spend 30 minutes to an hour filling that out really thoughtfully so that they can remind the teacher, you know, what their projects were like and what they were like in the classroom and those kinds of things. So that would be really helpful.
You've got several more asking about ETSU requiring ACT scores.
ETSU didn't this year, but they haven't announced for next year. Slide for resources. Best advice on covering out-of-state costs for public or private universities. Oh, I'm getting lost here. Wait a second. Sorry. Best advice. It's harder, honestly, at public schools. It's harder because the money is there to support their in-state students. So I would look at their competitive scholarship programs. So that's the equivalent to our Haslam or to the Jefferson at UVA. I would look at those. I would see if there's a way to do a thing called the Academic Common Market. Depending on, and this is just for public schools, depending on what school it is and what your major is. So there are specific things that our public schools in the state of Tennessee don't offer that that they can take for in-state tuition at other schools. So the big example I remember is marine biology. We don't have marine biology in the state of Tennessee. Excuse me. And so if a student wants to take those marine biology, they can go to, I think there are several different schools, University of North Alabama. I don't know what they all are, but so there are schools, but the key is they have to stay in that major. So what they get for that is in-state, they'll pay Tennessee in-state tuition, go to school out of state, but they have to stay in that major. The other thing that I would do is apply to schools where you're at the top end, right? Don't just fixate on those name brands. Find really good quality schools that are at the top, where you are at the top end of their admitted student profile, meaning that you're more appealing to them as a student and you're more likely to get merit aid. And so that's something to consider as well. There are 3,800 some odd colleges and universities in the US. There are lots of really amazing schools that you've never heard of. And I'm happy to help point those out to you should you desire.
We've got one back. Sorry, I was going to say we've got one from 645 that says, what do you suggest if we apply for UC British Columbia? That's a pretty specific one. Would it be better if they contacted you directly via email?
I don't see that. Are you talking about UBC? So there's University of British Columbia, which is an independent college, which is an independent university in Canada. So there is no UC British Columbia as part of the UC system. So there's UCBC. So there's UC Santa Barbara, there's UC San Diego. So yeah, that person should contact me at katie.king@knoxschools.org because I'm not sure what you're asking.
Had a question about the time frame for ACT scores for extended time student scores. I can speak to that one. I was actually speaking with Ms. McGrath, who's our testing coordinator. And she said that it's anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks and they release those in batches. So our students took it the first week of March. So if you don't have scores in the next 2 weeks, I would follow, she suggested to the parent to follow up with ACT directly and let us know. So if you don't have anything in the next 2 weeks, that would put us outside of the 4 to 6 week time frame. And Ms. King, down there, we have one from Ms. Abby Andrews asking about when to get those recommendation letters. I'll let you address.
So what's going to happen with the recommendation letters is that first you need to understand that teachers write the recommendations in confidence. So the expectation is that students will not be seeing the recommendation letters before they're sent. This makes some people nervous. However, I've been doing this for 20 years. And I can count on one hand the number of times that I felt like a recommendation letter wasn't up to par. So in that case, I will either go to the student and say, you need to pick a new recommender, or go back to the teacher and say, are you sure this is what you meant to say? And if they say yes, then I'll go back to the student and say, you need to pick another recommender. I'll never say, Mr. Jones wrote you a bad rec, you need to find somebody else. But what happens is you will request those in SCORE, and I'll probably open a window for that toward the end of the school year. And then the teachers will actually load them into SCORE, where they sit until I hit click to send. And so once you've requested those, honestly, you don't need to do anything else, because the teachers, SCORE will show them their deadlines. The teachers are aware of it. They're very good about hitting their deadlines. and then I send them as the college requires. So next year in SCORE, the students are going to, when they apply, they're going to use that My Colleges page, and I'm going to tell them how to do this, but they're going to move their colleges over to the applied section, and that triggers a transcript request, and it also triggers at the same time the recommendation letter. The request has already been made. Your student would have made that earlier, so the letter will be there, and I just go to a section called Send Documents under each particular kid and click the documents that need to be sent. And it's just as simple as that. And they all go electronically. There's nothing on paper anymore except for some of the local scholarships. And I'm excited for them one day to go online, but there's nothing about college applications happens on paper anymore. It's really different from when you and I were in school. A family in California, San Diego State. Okay, so the question is, we have family in California and our son is considering San Diego State, and is in-state determined by the high school the student goes to? How long must a student reside in another state to utilize that in-state tuition? As is so very often and common in college admissions questions, the answer is going to be, it depends on the school. And so what I would do is Google San Diego State residency. And it'll probably take you right to the residency requirements. And it will either say that you have to have graduated from a high school there, or you have to have lived here for, X number of months ahead of time. There's often a way to appeal residency, but it's often really hard. So I would just use that Google San Diego State residency. Can teachers who have left FHS, can you ask teachers who have left FHS for recommendations? Yes. Those teachers can email those letters to me and I can load them into SCORE for them. And then it's just the same application flow. So they just have to write it once. Teachers write a general letter of recommendation. They don't put, I strongly recommend you to X school. They just write a general letter that is sent to all schools. And so they just need to email it to me, and so I can get it in the application, the workflow.
I just got a great statement. It says, maybe reminding that if a student is going to put in a teacher's name for the recommendation, that it's important that they let the teacher know ahead of time.
Oh,
that
absolutely.
The student approach the teacher and kind of, so could you talk about that a little bit and kind of what that looks like for the student?
Okay, so so there are 3 steps to requesting a recommendation letter, and I will go over this with the kids before I make those live, and I will also give the teachers a heads up before I make those live. Step 1 is always to ask the teacher, and you do that either in person or via email. This day and age of email is completely legit. You ask the teacher and wait for a response. So you wait for them to say, yes, of course, I'll write you a recommendation letter. Then I will have posted the recommendation request form. I'll probably post it in Canvas, but I'll probably also put it in the webpage. I'm sorry, the email. And they fill that out very carefully and very purposefully to try to remind the teachers, jog their memory. If it's a teacher from last year or first semester, they're really going to need it. And then you put that request in SCORE. So those are the 3 steps. Please be aware that teachers and students have a lot of things in common, one of which is that we like to take our summers off. And so the teacher may decide to write it this spring, but they may put it off till fall. And don't be surprised if they do. Also, the other thing to remember is that deadlines are deadlines. So if the deadline is November 1st and the teacher's letter hasn't been sent or hasn't been loaded and it's, October 15th, please don't remind the teacher. They know it. They're very much aware of it. You could do a very pleasant, polite, one-time jog. But if you do more than that, it's going to become counterproductive. The teachers are very good about their deadlines. And I think we're just so used to it. we're just so used to dealing with the college application process that for us, we know the deadline's the deadline, but for you, it's like all your hopes and dreams in this one envelope. We are not going to let your hopes and dreams die because of a letter. So we're going to get them done.
I think you've got one more question down here, Ms. King. It was, do most schools require students to have teacher recommendation letters?
No. ETSU, MTSU, UTC, Tennessee Tech, Pellissippi, Austin P, UT Martin, none of those require a recommendation letter. So Alabama, University of Alabama does not require a recommendation letter. Do not assume that you have to have recommendation letters. Please check those college websites. Don't check those college websites to see what you're going to need. Because there's a good chance that unless you're applying to highly competitive schools, there's a really good chance you're not going to need one. And so that's gonna make everybody's life a little easier if you double check that first. So please don't request them now just because you think you'll need them. And there's also normally a limit of 2. So the sort of standard for competitive schools is 2 teacher recommendations and a counselor recommendation. And that counselor recommendation, y'all, is me. So there's a counselor recommendation request form that I beg you to spend time on. I put on there that I expect, 60 an hour, 1 hour to 2 hours. The more in-depth and insightful, personally insightful those answers can be, the more in-depth and personally insightful my letter can be. I also will do my very darndest to interview everybody who requests a letter, but last year I wrote almost 100 letters, and so that gets really, really hard. So those forms are crucial, especially in my case.
Ms. King, can I ask a clarification question? I know at a building I was at previously, I was the Key Club sponsor, and a lot of times I would spend around 3 years with students and see their volunteer experience and leadership skills firsthand. And there were several students who approached me to write letters. So I guess that's my question. Does it have to be an academic, or can it be someone else in a different role?
It can be someone else in a different role, but it's important that you, again, go to that college website and read what it says. Because, for example, it might say, send a recommendation letter from any adult who knows you well. Or it might say, send 2 academic recommendation letters. I had a couple kids that applied to Emory this year who sent like she was really interested in film. So she sent theater and some other non-core class. And Emory University emailed her and me and said, this isn't going to do. You have to send 2 core teachers. UT will say 1 academic teacher and 1 other adult who knows you well. So you just need to read those document required lists or the checklists on the college websites, and they're going to tell you exactly what they want.
Ms. King, I cannot thank you enough. I have a lot of notes. I feel much more informed, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
Parents and students. Yeah, no problem. Parents, students, if you have other questions, I put Ms. King's email address over there in our chat box. So we know other questions are going to come up, so don't hesitate to reach out to her. I want to reiterate what she said, that students, we really want you in the driver's seat, and that your parent and your counselors and your administrators are there as support, but really want you thinking through this. And if you need what I call a think partner, then please let us know. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'm going to reiterate that Ms. King shared is about checking your student email. That is definitely the easiest way for us as a school to communicate with you. So I would strongly encourage you to make sure you're checking that once, if not twice a day. And let us know what questions you have. We will be sending out an FAQ document based on the questions you all have submitted so far, and we'll also be sending this out as a recording through the Aspen email. Ms. King, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, it's it seems really intimidating now, but it's gonna be fine. We're all gonna be fine. It's gonna work out. I promise. It's just go step by step, baby steps, and it's all gonna work.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ms. King, for joining us. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.